Louise, can I just check that we have everyone that we're expecting this morning?
No, we don't.
No,
No, we don't. We don't have Cheryl Pierce at the moment, and Dr. Jones and Mr. Wood haven't joined the meeting yet, although they have been. Miss Hamilton sent them the invitations, but they haven't yet logged in.
okay. Are we yet live streaming?
We are now, Inspector.
We are, did you say?
We are, yeah.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Okay then, good morning everyone and welcome. It's now 9 o'clock and so I resume the further hearings of this examination of the North Hertfordshire local plan. I'm Simon Barclay. I'm a planning inspector and a chartered town planner, and I've been appointed by the Secretary of State to hold this examination into the soundness of the local plan. I'm trusting that everyone has read my general guidance note for the examination, and that everyone's also read my special guidance note about the use of Zoom during the hearings. I'm not going to repeat all of that. I'm sure you've read all of that. I suppose the main thing really in relation to using Zoom is that I'd prefer it if everyone joined the meeting with their microphone switched off and their camera on. I say camera on because I'd rather look at faces and be talking to some people rather than to a blank screen. Having said that, though, if you don't wish to have your camera switched on, that's fine. I suppose the obvious sort of point to make really is that when you are going to speak, if you can switch your mic on. And then when you finished with your contribution, if you could remember to switch it off again afterwards, that would be great. And in order to get into the discussion, if you know that there's something that you want to contribute, if you could please raise your virtual hand, which is one of the Zoom functions, which hopefully you've found rather than your real life hand. That would be great. So I think it's worth just doing some introductions so that we all know who is who, in case we've forgotten. So I'm simply going to, in a sort of school register style, just call your name, and if when you're called, if you could just say good morning and briefly introduce yourself, that would be marvellous. So for the council, in this session, then I have Ms. Ormsby.
Good morning, sir. Yep, I'm Suzanne Ormsby, Queen's Counsel and barrister for the council.
Thank you, and Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Nigel Smith, Strategic Planning Manager at North Herts Council.
Thank you. On behalf of Great Ashby Community Council, I have Councillor Logan. Your microphone is muted, Mr. Logan.
Sorry. Good morning, I'm Robert Logan. I've been a member of Great Ashby Community Council since its inception in 2011.
Thank you. And representing Miss Hamilton, I have, well, I think it's just Miss Hamilton, in fact.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yes, unfortunately, I don't think Chris would be able to join me because she's working on a site in Decorum, and Dr. Jenny Jones, I do believe, could be working, but I have emailed them and said if they can get on, then that'd be fantastic.
Okay, thank you for that. Have Mr. Norgan. You're on mute, Mr. Norgan. Your microphone's muted.
Yes, okay. Good morning.
There we are. Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, good morning.
And for picture SRL, I have Mr. Shuderavian.
That's correct, sir. Good morning. Paul Shuderavian, Queen's Counsel, acting for picture SRL in relation to GA2. And with me, to save a further introduction, is Mr. Keema of Keema Cavendish.
Thank you very much for that. And I have also Miss Wood.
Hello.
Good morning.
Excuse me one moment. Miss Pears has just joined the meeting.
Thank you for that, Louise. And Miss Pears, we're just doing introductions. So if you can hear me, if you wouldn't mind, just very briefly saying good morning and introducing yourself, that would be great. I don't know if you can hear me or not, Miss Pears. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here now. I've had trouble connecting this morning. Yes. My name is Cheryl Norgan, actually, and
apologies.
And I'm an independent person here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, okay. Are there any questions? Does everyone know what they're doing in relation to Zoom and everything like that, or are there any questions before we turn to this morning's agenda? Okay, very good, thank you. So let us go then to matter 25, and that is new land proposed for allocation, and this is in relation to site GA2, and that is the main modification put forward by the council under reference MM382. So what I'm going to do, as previously, is simply use my matters and issues paper. I haven't produced any separate agenda or anything like that. And just so we are absolutely clear, and as I have tried to highlight in my matters and issues paper, the discussion today is solely about the new areas of land now proposed through the main modification put forward by the council. I'm not going to go back into issues about, in this instance, site GA2. Generally speaking, we've discussed that at a hearing session at length already. So I would ask everyone to please not try to get additional points in about site GA2 as it was originally proposed. This is very much about the new area of land. So issue 25.1a then. Oh yeah, just one other thing I should probably mention, as in the real life hearings, you will see that my head's down quite a bit. That's because I need to take notes of our discussion and the main points coming out from it. Also, you might see that it looks like I'm sort of looking upwards into the middle distance. When I'm doing that, I am in fact looking at you if you're when you're speaking to me. It's just that my camera, because of where my camera is positioned, it looks like I'm looking up. So issue 25.1a then. This is probably for Mr. Smith in the first instance, and that is the inclusion of the new area of land for allocation necessary for soundness. Unfortunately, you're on mute, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Yes, it is necessary for soundness. Probably worth just pointing to the first pair of maps at the back of paper E, sir, so we're very clear about which area of land we are referring to. There's a sort of before and after map there showing the effect of the main modification.
That's E175. If you don't have it.
Bear with me just one moment. Yeah, I'm looking at that was attached, the two maps, the before and after, that were attached to the main modifications schedule.
It's the same as in paper E, yeah. We've just replicated them, so we're looking at the same thing. As you can see, the sort of the before map GA2 is somewhat separated from sort of the main highway network in Great Ashby, and on the after map you can see that we're extending the allocation effectively down the pylon corridor, what's referred to as the pylon corridor, to join to Mendip Way. And in that sense, the extent to which, or the spatial extent to which the policy is intended to apply hasn't changed, in that policy SP18 as submitted and examined in 2018 has a requirement for the access to be taken from Mendip Way. The policies map as submitted didn't show that. So this modification ensures that the relevant policy criteria can be applied to that land.
So it's what then, a question of effectiveness, is it?
Yes.
So it doesn't lead to any increase in the number of dwellings proposed?
No, as I say, it's simply a correction effectively to the policies map. It's a policy SP18D as submitted, required principal access from Mendip Way. The policies map obviously didn't include the land that will allow that to happen. So in order to apply the policy to the land, we need, for effectiveness, as you say, to make sure the written policy and the policies map match up.
Just one thing I wanted to be clear about.
Mm-hmm.
You call it the pylon corridor, is that?
I do. And if you look on the map, there's two dashed lines in the area we're adding coming up from Mendip Way. So there's two high voltage overhead power lines that run up through the middle of Great Ashby, and they continue out into GA2. Yeah. So I think in a number of statements and other participants may well just refer it to it as the pylon corridor, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, the proposed amendment isn't limited exclusively to the pylon corridor, though, is it? From my
there's the strip on the pylon corridor, and there's a small area. There's an area to the north which kind of fills in that sort of finger of what's marked as woodland on the OS base map. Well, it is woodland on the OS base map. So we've got the entirety of GA2 covered.
Okay, so the land then to the north of the pylon corridor, is that necessary for access?
Yes, in that, although obviously detailed master planning is yet to be agreed, it's only the indicative schemes shown on plans submitted to date show that the access coming up the pylon corridor and then effectively branching in a Y to create a loop road. Although, as I say, detailed design and layout is clearly a matter for the development management process.
Okay, so that's through, I think you said master planning there, didn't you?
Yeah, master planning and development management will obviously work out the precise layout of an access road, but from what we know to date, that's likely to be the arrangement.
Yeah. Okay. It's just that's about one particular scheme, isn't it, or about one particular master plan. I'm just not absolutely clear. I mean, it's not as clear cut in my mind, put it this way, as to why that parcel of land there is necessary for soundness.
Probably best. I mean, I appreciate you don't necessarily want the detail of all the schemes, but ED 106, which is the statement of common ground between the council and pictures the land promoter. At the very last page of that, there's an indicative master plan, which, as I say, shows an indicative layout and highway access, and that includes the two arms of the highway. So one arm of it going, as I say, up the middle of the pylon corridor, and a second spur going up to the north through that additional area of woodland.
So that's about what? Achieving the most efficient road layout.
Yeah, effectively about creating a looped layout, and obviously by bringing that area of woodland into the allocation, even if through the master planning and development management process, it turned out you didn't need to go through there. There are criteria within the policy around mitigation, compensation, enhancement of biodiversity features. So it would also mean you could apply that arm of the policy to that area of land. So in terms of an effective overall scheme, there's a justification for that part too.
Okay, just so everyone's aware, I do want to keep this question quite separate from the next one. So, is anyone here to say that it's not necessary for soundness reasons? I wasn't quite sure. If I may, I'll come to you in a moment, Ms. Hamilton. I wasn't quite sure where picture stood on that.
So, if I can help you.
Mr. Shadaravian.
We fully support the council's position on this. In order to maintain the effectiveness of the allocation, it's essential that this land is removed from the green belt. I mean, even if this particular layout is not followed precisely, to leave those strips within the green belt would constrain alternatives and thereby affect the effectiveness of the allocation. And it was always intended that these strips would be or form part of the proposed development, particularly in terms of access to the east and north.
Okay, we'll come on to questions about Greenbelt in a moment, but just for present purposes and for the avoidance of any doubt, so that the what are we calling it? I've forgotten again. The pylon corridor and the land to the north are presently Greenbelt, are they? I know I have some plans on that.
The additional land is part in and part out of the greenbelt. I mean, it's not quite this neat, but effectively, if on the plans, you can see Merrick Close on one side of the pylon corridor to the north and Grampian Place to the south. Effectively, the greenbelt boundary is a jagged edge, but effectively cuts across between those two areas of built development. So the area to the west, which is outside the greenbelt.
Yeah. So okay. So that's sort of the thinnest tip of the finger of the pylon corridor is outside the greenbelt, but then as it sort of gets a bit pudgier,
yes,
as it goes sort of northeastwards beyond Merrick Close. That is presently within the green belt.
That's right. I think as you've referred to, I think it's our Matter 10 statements from the first round of hearings has kind of before and after maps showing where the green belt boundary is if you need to sort of really look at the detail, but essentially correct, yes.
Okay, and right, okay. Thank you for that. Ms. Hamilton.
If they're talking about soundness, all I'd like to say on this topic is when they responded to you, they put, I don't know what document we're on now, they put an ED whatever regarding questions MM382, and they did a response to you regarding this and soundness. And all I'd like to say is in regards to number 7, they said that the fundamental requirement to have the primary access from Mendip Way had not been altered, but it has been highlighted, and I want to point out that this area has been highlighted previously, that there is an issue with it. It was highlighted back in 2016 when it was advised that a piece of the development on the original plan was going to be removed. And number 9, I just want to say, yeah, I've already highlighted not exceptional circumstances for this anyway, but the Spine Road, which is the new bit, which is the extra allocated bit, and the Spine Road is going to has now raised even further issues in regards to a protected species. Going forward with both these roads is literally going to wipe out a whole clan of badgers, which is actually against the Badger Trust. And yeah, this has been confirmed to be the case with this. So if they want to talk about soundness, you know, you can't put that there was no constraints when there are constraints. So, but that's it. That's just a quick comment.
I understand the point. What I think I'll do, because some of these questions do overlap, so that I'll look at further under question B3, which does go on to other constraints. So if we just put a pin in that one for now, and we'll come back to that shortly. Okay. I think then we'll go to issue B, and that is the deliverability of the site. So as I have it, it is confirmed by all landowners involved as being available. Is that right?
So,
I think as we put in our statement, there is some sort of fragmented ownership in that area. But I think Mr. Keemer's statement has letters of intent effectively from a number of those parties saying that they're willing to negotiate that on a commercial basis, and we discussed this at the original hearing again. There were no sort of foreseen issues with Picture or whoever obviously ultimately brings forward the site having total control of that access land at the time the scheme's brought forward.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add to that, Mr. Shadaravian? Shadaravian, isn't it?
Yes. Shadaravian, doesn't matter which. You would have seen correspondence going back to the start of this year to confirm what was confirmed to you in 2018, that although the land is not owned by Picture, it's owned by a number of different parties or parties with interests in it. North Herts, Crowd Ace, Homes England, Stevenage, and the Western Settlement. All of these parties have confirmed their willingness to negotiate access on commercial terms, with Homes England expressing interest in participating in the development of the site. So in terms of deliverability, so you should have no doubt that it is deliverable.
Okay, thank you. And if I can go then to question 2, is it supported by evidence to demonstrate that safe and appropriate access for vehicles and pedestrians can be provided?
Yes, it has. You examined this when we first looked at this site in 2018. We had the Highway Authority, and as I said, effectively we examined the policy as written, which talks about taking the access from Mendip Way. So there's no alteration in that regard to the intent or the evidence you heard from the Highway Authority in 2018.
And again, did you want to add to that, Mr. Shadarivian?
Yes, sir, we're fully confident actually that the access will be safe and appropriate. You've had the benefit of seeing various studies undertaken on behalf of both the council and Picture. And indeed, there was a statement from Wormwood Borough's civil engineering consultants, which reinforces the comprehensive highway and traffic studies undertaken between 2016 and 17. So again, sir, you should have no doubt at all about the safety and appropriateness of the proposed access.
Okay, and I'll go then directly to question 3. Is it deliverable having regard to the provision of the necessary infrastructure and services and any environmental or other constraints?
Again, yes, it is. Do you want us to touch on the ecology now, or is that more for question C? I guess they're sort of one and the same.
Do it now.
As Ms Hamilton's alluded to, obviously we're aware there are protected species in the vicinity of this landwater and across the site. In general, there are policy criteria already in GA 18 about appropriate mitigation measures. We've had no objection from Natural England, obviously as the licensing body. There's no fundamental constraint identified by Hert's ecology. And again, I think this is really a matter for detailed master planning, development management, as is acknowledged in the various statements. Obviously, the populations in this site move around. There have been some changes in the last couple of years.
My apologies, Mr. Smith. I didn't catch that. If you could say that again.
So the latest evidence you have from various parties obviously demonstrate that locations of badgers within and surrounding the site have moved slightly in the intervening couple of years since the last hearings. And if you look at the trajectory, obviously this site is not due to come forward for another few years still. So it's a matter really for detailed master planning and development management to obviously take into account up-to-date ecological information at that point and avoid, mitigate, compensate as appropriate at that time. But from the plan's point of view, we'd say what's there for GA2 and in policy SP18 is an appropriate and proportionate policy framework that acknowledges those issues and allows them to be taken into account at the appropriate time.
Okay, and so this is primarily about badgers, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and what might mitigations be?
Well, around either detailed design and alignment of road accesses. If it's mitigations, there's reference in the information put forward both by Ms Hamilton and by Picture around artificial sets, obtaining appropriate licenses.
So
I'm sorry.
Potentially then, in effect, rehoming the badgers elsewhere.
Potentially, yes. And again, in policy SP18 as modified, we also talk about ensuring there's connectivity and green corridors to the wider countryside. So acknowledging that there are parcels of woodland, hedgerows and so on within this site, and ensuring that that's all appropriately taken into account.
And in your view then, Mr. Smith, that's something that it would be possible to do if need be?
Yes, it is. And I note the study put in on behalf of Ms Hamilton also refers to detailed mitigation being required rather than there being an absolute block.
Ms. Hamilton.
Okay, I'm going to take this very slowly because I don't want to miss out on anything regarding this, because this is why I started this 5 years ago, was because of the huge amount of biodiversity on this site, and the fact that when you look around the whole of Stevenage, this actual site here has the most densest biodiversity of all other sites around Stevenage. So this is why I got involved, and this is why I got involved particularly with this area, because unfortunately, the law was broken a couple of times previously when Great Ashby was built, by the developers, by the road layers, by the North Arts District Council, whoever. It got broken and there was a lot of problems, and there are still a lot of problems because of the actions of the original Great Ashby site. We still have a lot of issues between residents and badgers because of actions. Now, first of all, I'd like to say, in respect to Mr. Smith's point that like there's been no problem with Natural England. Well, firstly, I would like to say you haven't got a problem with Natural England at the moment because Natural England aren't aware of the situation in that site. If they, you know, if they were to sit on a meeting with us and they were to look at this map and they were to look at all the information that we have provided, they would turn around and say, yes, we can definitely see a problem with this site. You know, you said that Hertfordshire ecology.
My apologies. I just want to be sure that when you're saying this site,
GA2.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the whole of GA2.
The extra land, the extra land, the extra land.
When you say this site, I take it that you're talking about the
allocated
land proposed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Also, Mr. Smith said that Hertfordshire ecology haven't got a problem with it. Well, there is two bodies. I mean, the most recent report was from an actual Hertfordshire ecologist. So I don't know how you can say Hertfordshire ecology don't have a problem with it, because she is a Hertfordshire ecologist and she's had experience of over 40, 50 years of that very thing. And also the Herts and Middlesex Badger Group have got a problem with it. Now, okay, at the end of the day, an ecologist does his job, but they have specialised fields, some reptiles, some birds, what have you. And the people that have put into this and the people that have objected to this site and also the extra allocated part are people with 30 years experience of Natural England licenses, artificial sets, closures of sets, bait marking. And all of those people have said there is an issue with both the access road and the new spine road. Well, in regards to Dr. Jenny Jones, she hasn't actually said there's an issue with the new spine road, because when she actually looked at the site, she only looked at the access because we've been out all day and it was getting dark. But she's since been made aware of the things that we found with the spine road as well. And they are all in equal agreement that this is going to cause a severe issue. In regards to the original thing, and Mr. Smith said about, you know, no one's objected to anything. Miss Wood did say to me today, she said, if I'm not able to come on, if you can reiterate what we did say originally, that in 2016, on the original talk of all this, and that was without the allocated extra bit, she said that they'd have to have big discussions on mitigation. And then when she wrote in again, she said, all of our advice has been ignored in regards to this. This is not even taken into account the extra land for an allocated spine road. And as far as we are concerned, this development should not go ahead because of the issue surrounding that patch, because the original advice that was offered was totally ignored, and this bit was added and then that bit was added. So by allocating this new area, you're just increasing the problem with it. Mr. I don't know who wrote this, but in the consulting report, because obviously Mr. Smith has just talked about, oh yes, we can mitigate, you know, we can do this, we can do that. At the end of the day, no one's even aware of the huge extent of badgers in that area, and particularly, you know, the connotations in New Spring Wood. Now that is where the allocated land is. Now, if people aren't aware of the huge situation, and all the connotations, how can you make a decision on that? It all joins into one. So if you have got a clan of badgers that cover the majority of the GA2 site, and then you have a separate clan of badgers on the new allocated bit, at the end of the day, of course, it's going to problem because it is linked, and you need to address that, because you can't say something's deliverable when you haven't taken that into account. And in the Elm Law ecological report, which is what obviously Mr. Smith is referring to, they've sort of stated that yes, it states when excluding badgers from a set, make sure there are alternative sets nearby that badgers can relate to, and if required, build artificial sets as early as possible before excluding badgers from the original set. Right, well, in regards to this area in New Spring Road, they then go on to say there is sufficient space with any of the woodlands that Picture SRL own, and we can provide a sufficient artificial badger set if required. I need to point something out regarding this, because they make it sound nice and easy. It is not nice and easy. It's time consuming. And at the end of the day, it messes up with a time frame, and it messes up with costs as well, and profitability at the end of the day. Because this building artificial set, so you've got these badgers in the area, in the new allocated area and the access road area. So you've got these badgers there. You have to build an artificial set near to their old artificial set, because you have to encourage them basically to move there. You can't force them to move there. And at the end of the day, if you was to build an artificial set in a woodland, which is in the territory of another clan, it doesn't matter how many peanut trails you lay towards that new set, those badgers are not going to go into it at the end of the day. So I'd just like to clear up by what Elm Law have said in their report regarding this, because they do make it sound easy. When the previous chair was there and he looked at the plans with the access road and the extra land, he said, even if it's possible, the badger mitigation costs would be absolutely exorbitant, and the time delays larger, basically. That's what he said. So I will quickly address what I can with this, so you have all the facts, Inspector. Okay, so ED 93 said there was no apparent fundamental ecological constraint to this area. And like I said, HMBG made advisories in 2016 that were ignored. We have got, let me work it out so I can just tell you the exact situation. Basically, the reason this is all materialised, and I do apologise for not being able to highlight this to the council in 2016. We highlighted there was an issue, which is why we suggested in the original plan removing some of that development to get around that issue. But when they increased it in size, it became even more of an issue. Back then, I had found a number of territory latrines. Now, badgers, I know this is a bit of a strange offbeat thing, but it all sort of interlinks. Badgers will have territory latrines at the edge of their territory. It's the thing they do at a certain time of the year. So other clans are aware of it, other males are aware of it. And I found 2 lots of territory latrines in between Elm Law, that's the ecologists, 2 outlier sets, which is in the pylon corridor. Okay, and with the rest of the badgers. And I raised the point that I thought there was an issue with a separate clan. So that was the first thing that happened. And then in February 2018, I took in a mammal recorder, but I would like to point out that the mammal recorder, even though for Bedfordshire, he is also part of the Herts and Middlesex Badger Group. And he's also had over 30 years of experience of bait marking and mitigation and licensing and closures of sets. And he came along with me. And in February 18, he said, this is a separate clan. That's a separate clan. He said, you can tell by the runs, you can tell by the pathways, there is no runs leading out eastwards to where the other clan's territory is. And the territorial latrines prove that. Okay, so yesterday, what we like to do, I mean, we followed this as well. And back in 10th of February 2018, which was literally only a short time after the ecologists first raised this point, they said you've got two sets. One has one hole, one has three holes, they're outliers. We came back and we said there's an issue, and one of the sets has got at least 5 holes, and the area is covered in brambles and scrub, so you wouldn't have been able to sort of get in there and find any further holes, but as we said, minimum of 5 holes. And then there was another set with a couple of holes as well. So by this point, we'd established there was another clan. Now, what we like to try and do with all the hearings and all the authorities is, before a hearing of a certain point, so with this being allocated land, what we always try and do is we try and go and resurvey so we can give you and the council the most up-to-date information possible in regards to this. So, right. So basically, Mr. McCarrick had concerns regarding the pylon corridor anyway, in regards to hazel dormouse. He has found evidence of hazel dormice on the GA2 site, so he's raised alarm bells about that. We went and surveyed on the 5th of December, so that was Saturday, and there was a mammal recorder who's got 30 years experience of badgers, and myself. Okay, I would also like to point out that when we had arrived at this point, some of the residents had come out and sort of said, you know, you're all right, what you doing, blah, 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 obviously different cars. And I said, well, yeah, we're having a look at the extra allocated road. These residents that live in Merrick Close, I think it's Merrick Close or Merrick Drive, aren't even aware of this situation. So still a lot of the community are in the dark about it, so they haven't had the involvement. So we went and surveyed, and the pylon set 1, that's the first set. So that is the set on the southern end of the pylon corridor. And I have to relay this to you because it sort of entwines and shows you the bigger picture, Inspector. So the pylon set, which is the first set you would come to, has got 4 holes, of which 3 are active. And then the next set, which is the main set, has a minimum of 10 holes that are active. Now, this is a minimum. Obviously, there's going to be further holes under that scrub, but it's just dense. There's no way you're getting through that at all. Which is one of the reasons why maybe originally the ecologist might have not given a full picture as to this area, because it was covered in brambles. Like, you could see one hole from the sort of pathway, but you wouldn't have been able to see all the other holes unless you'd sort of like rummaged, so to speak. So unfortunately, these constraints weren't highlighted originally for you, Inspector, in 2016, or with the council, because this might have shed a lot different light on this site if all of the badger issues have been highlighted right at the very beginning. So we checked these. We also found an extra outlier hole. So under that pylon line, you've got a main set, a subsidiary set, and an outlier. Yes, the outlier can be closed, not a problem. The main set, you would have to have a set. You can't just close it, because the next set to that is actually in another clan, so you can't just close it. So you'd have to have an artificial set. Now the question is, where are you going to put that? We surveyed the actual extra bit of land. There was 3 of us. I think there was 3 of us actually. We had another member of our team out, but there was definitely us 2 out there. And we surveyed that bit of land, and what we found was the elm law hadn't picked up anything to do with their foraging ground. You don't just provide a set by law for the welfare of badgers, you have to provide suitable foraging ground as well. Now, exactly where that link road is going to go is where that clan of badgers forage. We found foraging holes. I've got the reference for that. We also found an extra outlier hole on the other side of New Spring Wood. Now, this is no longer in use. Residents have said that it was there last year, the previous year. It's not been picked up by the ecologists at all. And it had been filled in last year by somebody, and the residents had unfilled it. But there was another singular outline hole further round on the edge. But it's not in use, and that could be because the rest of this wood on the western side is quite damp. Also yesterday we found a run underneath the fence directly behind Merrick. So again, where they want to put this new spine road, you've got a foraging ground, we had a latrine, and you've also got a run under the fencing. You can definitely see it's like a D shape to the further foraging area, which is running alongside the building of these flats, which would be overlooking this access road, basically.
Yep, a lovely 0 degrees. Literally been shivering in the office. Heating is on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think someone has their microphone on who shouldn't.
Yeah, I think it's Mr. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, he's gone mute. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. That's okay. We also found badger hair as well on the lower wire of the fence too, confirming sort of like, you know. So basically, what this shows, as our surveys have determined, one clan habitats the most of GA2. The pylon clan sets are in the location of the access road, and their foraging ground basically their foraging ground is in line of your spine road. So we've got a major problem now in the fact that, you know, I don't even know, and Mr. Smith doesn't know. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, you can't know how this could even be considered to be mitigated, because you're literally going to have roads around that New Spring Wood, because you want a circular roadway to tick your boxes. Now, that includes a whole clan of badgers that you would totally encompass. And I don't know, how can you even mitigate for that, you know, with welfare in mind and the Badger Act, which is the law, you know, and this is what I'm saying. You know, I don't know how anyone can say this is deliverable without seeing the seriousness of this ecological constraint at the end of the day. This is huge. And we've been trying to tell you there are issues with this site since 2016. And that's not just me, but that's, you know, that these are experts in the field. These are experts we're working with all authorities in Hertfordshire. You know, Buxbourne have met with us, Decorum have met with us. We're not really understanding, you know, we asked to meet with you like years ago on this, and it's been ignored and ignored and ignored. And we've said, you know, from the very start when we said you definitely need to remove some of this around this access road, and that was totally ignored. Let's double the site in size, and you've just absolutely, this is not word, hugened the issues that you've got. So, you know, in regards to this, it's not deliverable. I mean, you've also got tawny owls nesting in that, where that spine road is going to go as well. And you wouldn't even get, you're talking about we'll ignore it, we'll go to master planning, but there is no way. I mean, I spoke with the chair last night and I said, how could you mitigate? She said, you can't mitigate it with that access road and that spine road where it is. Even the Herts ecologist suggested to you that the best thing for this whole site would be to move the access road. And she's a Herts ecologist with 40, 50 years experience. And yet everyone's being ignored. So I say it again, in regards to the deliverability, constraints have been identified all the way along in every single hearing statement and every single hearing that we've attended, and it's not deliverable. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ms Hamilton, for that. Okay, Mr Shadarivian.
Thank you, sir. Notwithstanding the omission of this land from the submission policies map, it has always been assessed as part of the potential development site, and so was the subject of the 2017 ecological assessment. We have always been aware of the evolving status of the denning behavior of badgers, and Picture SRL are very aware of their legal obligations to ensure the welfare of badgers within the development of the GA2 site. Now, in response to matters raised by Ms. Hamilton, and in response to the report that was put in, we had Keith Seaman of Elmore Consulting go back on site, and he produced a follow-up report in November, which we haven't submitted to you because it was outside the time for the submission of responses to your questions. And also it wasn't an issue which we thought actually would play a large part in your consideration of whether or not these small fingers of land should be included. Nevertheless, that report is available should you wish to see it. But the conclusions of the report are that the alleged loss of the main set within the scrub between New Spring Wood and Broaches Wood through the proposed new access road assumed by Ms. Hamilton and others on behalf of her is not predicted by us, and certainly not by our ecologist, who I hasten to add is available to speak to you in this session to be assisted by his intervention. We do not predict that the set will be lost due to the new access road. It is located below the electricity pylons, 35 to 40 meters from the extent of the roadworks, and within a 65-meter wide scrub corridor between the two woodlands. And the adjacent outlier set lies over 20 meters from the extent of the roadworks, so that the distance from a set that adverse impacts, such as the construction of a new road, may occur when a subsequent Protection of Badgers Act disturbance license will be required, is currently 20 meters. Both sets are likely to be outside the 20-meter licensable zone, negating the loss of either set. So that's Mr. Seaman's response to that. We can put a copy of the report in to the examination if necessary. But at the moment, we don't see any problem arising, nor do we see any impediment to the strategy which we've clearly set out in the past, and with which Natural England have been perfectly happy.
Ms Hamilton.
Where we were yesterday, you're talking about the road would not have those two sets closed, you don't feel. So does that mean you're taking out even more woodland for the spine road then? Because the sets are under the pylons, well, some of the set holes are under the pylons, but that isn't the Bruce's Wood side. That's more the New Spring Road wood, the New Spring Wood side. So at the end of the day, that doesn't really make sense unless you're going to take out even further woodland than the spine road. And you know this, you haven't even well, why hasn't the other hole been located? You know, why hasn't all the foraging been located and the run under the fence? If Mr. Seaman has, you know, resurveyed yet again, why have these things not been brought to light? I mean, obviously we'd like to see this latest report, but I would like to remind you that a number of sets were missed when the original ecology report was first put forward, and some of those set holes were like a target practice in the middle of a field, and we all questioned why they were missed. And I think even at the time, Mr. Kamar, that was at the hearing, actually looked at Mr. Seaman as if to say, what is all this? And Mr. Seaman actually shrugged his shoulders. So, you know, let's not forget. I know that, you know, you say, oh well, you know, things can change, and yes, they can change. A set can increase in size, but it doesn't suddenly increase from a survey in 2017 to 2018 in a matter of months, a number of holes. And you've got to look at the whole picture. You know, it's no good just saying, oh well, okay, yeah, we won't touch the set, but we will have totally cut them off from their foraging ground. You know, everyone that we have had on site, that's the old chair of the Badger Group, that is the latest chair of the Badger Group, Dr. Jenny Jones, who's the heart ecologist, a mammal recorder, myself, and every single person is saying you've got an issue there. So, you know, and I would like to point out that on a recent development, when Natural England was involved, Natural England suggested to the developers and the LPA that they contacted the Herts and Middlesex Badger Group. So the Herts and Middlesex Badger Group's advice is taken, you know, quite widely by many LPAs. So I'd just like to mention that fact. But yes, we will be interested in seeing this report.
Yeah, I think I do, Mr. Shadarivian, need to see that report as well.
Well, we're very happy to provide it. You will understand why it wasn't provided initially is because it was outside the scope of the protocols. So we will present it to you. But can I just say this? We're looking at this at plan level, and there is absolutely no evidence before you to suggest that the site cannot be developed and that appropriate mitigation strategies cannot be in place at a later development management stage. It's very important that that factor is acknowledged. But nonetheless, we are happy to put this report in. It could be made an examination document once it's been submitted. What happens with that, sir, is a matter for you afterwards.
Thank you. Ms Hamilton, are you?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, the chair did ask me to just say one thing, alert you to one thing. She said, what you've got to understand is just because you obtain planning permission, it doesn't guarantee you a license will be granted. And they have known this in a number of cases. At the end of the day, you have to provide suitable foraging ground and you have to stick to the welfare of the Badger Act. Otherwise, you will not get your license. We believe that tile kiln wood is a very damp wood and it's not the right habitat, which is why there is no evidence of badgers within that woodland. Again, so we ask you, how is your access road and spine road deliverable seeing the seeing the scale of their foraging ground and their welfare in this area. She just wanted that added. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else before I turn to the council to see if they have want to make a last comment on this particular issue before I put the badger issue to bed? I can't tell if you want to say anything or not, Mr. Smith.
Sorry, I thought you were on a last call for other participants.
Apologies.
Yeah, that's okay. I think overall this just goes back to our original point about ensuring effectiveness. As you've heard and you can see from the evidence, there's widespread acknowledgement from all sides about ecology and protected species on the site. There's widespread acknowledgement that appropriate mitigation surveying and so on will be required, and that's why we would say it's important this additional land is added to the policies map, so that the criteria of policy SP18, which talk both about the excess and about mitigation in terms of biodiversity and protected species, can be effectively applied to this area of land.
Okay, thank you. I think that probably also covers point C, doesn't it? Unless anyone wants to say anything else about that before I move to issue 25.2. Okay, very good. I'll move then to issue 25.2. So, yeah, part of the additional land is currently in the green belt. The question then of the existence or otherwise of exceptional circumstances, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I would mainly direct you to our statement. I mean, I know you've said obviously this session is only about the additional land, but I think in terms of exceptional circumstances, we have to marry it up with the remainder of the site. Obviously, we've set out the exceptional circumstances for GA2 in general, and I'm not going to go over those because I appreciate that's outside the scope, but clearly in providing the access to the land or bringing that access land within the allocation, the same broad principles apply. And obviously, if you were to leave this land out in itself, the small area of greenbelt land in this additional land would itself perform no greenbelt function, because plainly we're already asking you to remove land beyond that point from the greenbelt and establish a new outer greenbelt boundary around the edge of GA2.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of comparing and contrasting the before and after, and I think you would end up, would you, with a sort of almost an island of green belt sort of protruding into the site.
Yes, you would. As you say, if you look at the before and after maps on our Matter 10 statement, which has the proposed boundary around the outside edge of GA2, you're right, there'd be a sort of finger of green belt within the site, effectively, when you'd release the land beyond it from the green belt. And obviously, that would make no real sense or serve no real purpose in green belt terms.
Mr. Shedarivian.
Yes, just to reinforce the council's point here, paragraph 139 of the MPPF clearly says that you shouldn't include land in a green belt that doesn't need to remain permanently open. And if you accept the functional importance of these fingers, this small additional piece of land, then it follows that exceptional circumstances exists in relation to the removal of one of these elements from the green belt.
Ms. Hamilton.
Hi, so we're talking about exceptional circumstances to remove the allocated extra bit, yes?
That's right, yeah.
There's not exceptional circumstances. It doesn't, it's a part of the whole thing. That they're saying it's a part of the whole thing. And we don't have the exceptional circumstances for that bit or any other bit. Because at the end of the day, you know, it talks about in the bit that they've said in the response, and they've said a certain thing. They've said, look at ED 147 and look at this and look at that and everything else, and you go to that and you sort of try and sort of put it together. You know, at the end of the day, exceptional circumstances to remove all this allocated extra bit ticks the boxes so the policies can be pushed forward in line with this development. But at the end of the day, that the whole thing needs the exceptional circumstances, including that bit. And at the end of the day, you know, how is there exceptional circumstances for this or the other bit? That there isn't the exceptional circumstances, because
when you just if I can just pause you there, let me put it to you. Let me put a question to you. Okay. If I think that in relation to all of GA2, there's exceptional circumstances either do or don't exist, is it logical that the same answer applies to the new land as well?
And I think so. Yeah, definitely, because we've already highlighted, that they say certain things are needed for the exceptional circumstances, and that's obviously with the allocated bit as well. And it's like social infrastructure. I've pointed out there's no secondary school. We've had the new site confirmed now. It's been confirmed. The MPs are aware of it. So no secondary school. No GP. But don't worry, we're going to go towards this lesser usage of vehicles, and we're going to hit the tick box for the mobility cycle scheme. And we've already pointed out that as well, that the cycle paths are not continual, they're actually a health hazard. Somebody's just come around and put up little blue signs making pavements dual use. I mean, only on the Saturday when I drove up there was a lady with her buggy and a child heading for that direction, and it's supposed to be also a dual cycle path. Well, you couldn't fit a cyclist going around that lady with her buggy and her child. There was no. Sorry, I do apologise. I do apologise, sir. I'm sorry. I'll just stop her. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Right. Like I say, I'll come back to Ms. Hamilton in a minute. I do hope no one was hurt in that skirmish, Miss Hamilton.
I'm so sorry. Yes, I was saying, in regards to exceptional circumstances, we've spoken about the secondary school not happening. We've spoken about no GP. We're talking about the cycle paths, and it's like somebody's come along and whammed these little signs in just to tick a box. They end on like a busy junction that they're going across. This cycle path, one of these cycle paths, actually goes across different roads 5 times in a really short space of time. It's called parked cars up it. So this again, is there exceptional circumstances for these things? And also it's like it doesn't tick those boxes for anything. None of those tick boxes are. And I would just like to highlight something else. I've said about the school site now, which is going to be in the east of Stevenage. Yeah. I'd just like to point out, I put in an appendix a long time ago, about 5 years ago, I think now. And, you know, that's another one of their points for keeping this site in this plan. And that is its cohesive neighbourhood. Now I put in Appendix 1.
Ms. Hudson, I'm going to have to ask you to pause there, because you're quite clearly, I think, going on to make arguments about the whole
on a tangent.
Which you know, I can't.
No, that's okay. So I was just sort of saying that Appendix each properly shows the way that it's going against all the policies, in the fact that it's actually. Did you know that as the crow flies, GA2 is closer to Letchworth than the main part of Stevenage town centre and all the retail area and the railway? It's actually closer to Letchworth. That's how far out GA2 would be. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Yeah, I want to go now on to B, which is the nature and extent of the harm to the green belt of removing the new area of land from it.
So, as you've alluded to in your question to Ms. Hamilton, and this applies, to be fair, to all our remaining questions on green belt, we sort of concur with the view that although we're looking at this additional area of land, you have to look at it in the context of GA2 as a whole. And so effectively all of our answers follow the same pattern as for the wider site. So in terms of harm, we said this would be significant harm, because clearly without the site, there would be no need for this land, and vice versa. So all of the subsequent answers really follow through and link you back to what we've already told you about site GA2.
Yeah, okay. Go through all this. Sorry, do bear with me for just one moment, please. Right, I'm going to cover each of the questions just briefly. I was wondering whether I needed to, or whether they have in effect already been covered, but nonetheless, I think that I need to do the exercise. But if I take the council's response to question C first of all, alongside B, to what extent would the consequent impacts on the purposes of the green belt be ameliorated or reduced to the lowest reasonably practicable extent?
Again, as stated, that refers back to Matter 10 statement and the policies in the plan, particularly criterion G in SP18, which talks about structural planting to reinforce a revised green belt boundary in that location.
Yeah, and this plays as well, I think, into question D. Would the adjacent green belt continue to serve at least one of the 5 purposes, or would the green belt function be undermined by its allocation? And this goes, does it, to the point about, or the question about what purpose the lands that would remain in the green belt would actually serve as this site was originally proposed?
Yeah.
I didn't clearly, did I? But I think you know what I mean.
Yes, I did. Yes, if you were to permit the removal of the remainder of GA2 yet not allocate this land, then this patch of additional land would serve no purpose, we say, and even the access corridor might be permissible as not inappropriate development under MPPF in any case. So as we said in our statement, again, without wanting to stray too far into the wider site, the additional land doesn't alter the extent or the location of the outer boundary of the greenbelt. This is effectively infilling a hole between GA2 and the existing urban area.
I can see that, Ms. Hamilton, I can see you've got your hand raised. What I'm going to do is just finish off the sequence going through the questions through to G with Mr. Smith, and then come back to you and you can sort of deal with all those points together. Okay. And E, I suppose, is a very closely related question, isn't it, Mr. Smith?
Yes, it is. Again, our statement for this matter refers you back to what we've already stated in relation to matter 10. As you say, it's all intertwined with the remainder of GA2. It's all in or all out.
Yeah, sure. You can understand though why I have to ask these questions.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to answer them.
Questions, but yeah. And are you going to say the same thing in relation to F?
I'm afraid I am, yes.
Yeah, G might be slightly, well, it might provoke some slightly more interesting discussion. I don't know. Has the greenbelt boundary around the new land been defined clearly using physical features that are readily recognisable and likely to be permanent? Does it avoid including land which it is unnecessary to keep permanently open?
Yes, again, obviously in proposing that we add this land to the allocation, you create a more cohesive boundary around GA2 as a whole. You don't end up with a sort of isolated little island of greenbelt within the middle of it. And as Mr. Shallaravian said, and we've said, yeah, obviously if you were to permit the remainder of GA2, then this land would serve no real purpose in terms of keeping land permanently open within the greenbelt.
Okay, Ms. Hamilton.
So one little pocket of greenbelt left. So just a quick question, Mr. Smith, does Bruce's Wood not come under greenbelt then, or part of greenbelt? Because I thought that parcel of land was part of greenbelt.
Bruce's Wood would be removed from the greenbelt as part of this. It wouldn't form part of the allocation, but on our matter 10 statement, you can see that the boundary that we've proposes to remove that land.
Okay, right. Just to quickly come back on those few questions. B, yes, it would result in significant harm to the greenbelt if removed. And we've already proved that the harm is greater than the benefits. Well, we don't even know of any benefits. We can't even think of any benefits from it. Apart from, no, there's none. Right. Number C, I've got no idea. My brain has died, I think, quite frankly. I think I've read C about 100 times and I don't know, I didn't come out with anything. Number D, yes, it does. Sorry. D, yes, it does stop. The question, yeah, D. It must have been a question about, you know, will it still have an effect or something? I've got the questions on an open page somewhere. Yes, it would stop urban sprawl and protect the countryside. But to be quite honest with you, would that be permanent? No, of course it wouldn't be permanent, because, you know, that was said the last time when Great Ashby was built. Yeah, we need some housing. We'll build Great Ashby. Look, we've got a nice woodland block, which is like the edge, you know. I know you want to go through the woodland blocks, which was a really good, it was a good buffer for the edge of the town. It was a good buffer. But now we're looking at going through that good solid buffer of lots of woodlands to using like just using footpaths and stuff at the end of the day. At the end of the day, Picture SRL did safeguard other land previously ages ago, and then they said that they weren't going to safeguard the land. But at the end of the day, any boundaries like this, we're kidding ourselves if we're going to say, yeah, we're going to have this new boundary and we're going to do this. It'll be a tree line and we'll plant some trees and that'll be it and that'll be permanent, because we know it won't be. We know that when the next plan comes up, we're going to be vying for more and more, which is what happened with Great Ashby in the first place. Great Ashby didn't benefit anyone in Stevenage. It just took away its green belt and its open space. And you're doing the same thing. You're increasing vehicle use. You're going against your own policies. You're ignoring certain things. And I'm sorry, but this is significant harm to this site. E, I've got not applicable. Can't remember what that question was. F, I've got no. And G, I've just put, I don't know what is question G? Is that something about the boundary, the new boundary?
It is, has the Greenbelt boundary around the new land been defined clearly using physical features that are readily recognisable and likely to be permanent?
Right, okay, well, that bit, well, they can't really stick in a boundary. It's housing, it's already there. And unless they want to plough down tile kiln wood as the next bit, I should imagine that boundary for the spine road is pretty much in place, to be honest with you. So yeah, I don't really know what to, my brain's died. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. Sorry.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Is there anything else you want to say on this, Mr. Shadarivian, before our discussion comes to a close?
Simply to say, sir, that the additional report will be submitted this afternoon.
Thank you.
And apart from that, I wish to thank you very much for this morning's session.
Yes, well, you are more than welcome. Thank you for your contribution. Ms. Hamilton.
Sorry, sir. I just wanted to add one last thing. Look, I just wanted to reiterate that, we're not, we don't want North Herts thinking it's us and them. We've always had good relationships with authorities. It's not an us and a them, and next plan, let's start from the beginning and work together, please. I would just like to say that, my final word on this to everyone, and I'm sorry to Picture SRL at the end of the day, maybe these issues should have been highlighted right at the start and we wouldn't be here now, but at the end of the day, I just want to point out, everyone's gone on about, with that new green belt as a compensation, about how it's going to be an important resource for your urban areas. And just, if you go ahead with this site, not only are you going to have serious complications, because I'm afraid we're not going to go away on this. This is important to us. And at the end of the day, you're removing that very important recreational resource which you are proposing as GA2, and that's another reason why you do not have exceptional circumstances. Thank you for your time and thank you for allowing me to speak, Inspector.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Mr. Norgan.
Yes, hello. I'd like to make a general point, if I may, but the general point does apply to GA2, as it applies equally to all of the sites. The thing that concerns me is we are talking about which site should go into this plan, and yet we don't at the moment know what the housing requirement is for the plan. So it seems, I was going to use a phrase which I shouldn't use really, it's the whole thing in reverse really. You would think that we ought to know exactly what the housing requirement is before we start to discuss which sites we're going to put the houses on. Now, this doesn't matter very much if the housing requirement as determined by NHDC is not likely to be changed very much. But under the circumstances that we have at the moment, I think it could possibly be changed quite considerably. For instance, the NHDC are saying they want to build 13,000 houses. Now, I know, as I put one of the objections in at this level, that if you interpret the input which you have to use to obtain the OAN, that you could get 5,000 houses for the total. Now that is a considerable difference.
Yeah, no, I totally understand your point, Mr. Norgan. I think that the here is that if I were to agree with others who think that the OAN should be significantly lower, and therefore the plan's housing requirement should be significantly lower, then that may well in turn have significant implications for the proposed allocations in the plan. So really, this part of the examination is on the basis of the OAN and plan requirement that has been identified by the council, because it's my job to scrutinise all of their evidence. But I can't draw any conclusions until I've heard all of that. But as I say, if I were to agree with others in relation to the OAN, then that would have significant implications, and I would need to decide that the best way forward at the time. I understand what you mean.
Point out the extent of the difference that could occur if in fact the OAN was determined to be around 5,000. Now I say 5,000 because there are reasons to consider that number. One of the reasons is that the ONS suggests that the increase in population, the country as a whole, is something like 10% over the next 20 years.
Mr. Norgan, I'm going to have to stop you there because I simply can't entertain having any sort of discussion that is putting forward sort of, reasons why an OAN might be different, because not everybody who with an interest in the OAN is here, and it would be totally unfair to them aside from anything else. But in terms of like I say, in terms of the point that you make about the process, about the procedure, I can understand. I totally get why it kind of feels like that. You need to sit the one thing down before all the others can fall into place. So I do totally understand the point, and as I say, if I were to agree with others in relation to the OAN, then that would have significant impacts in relation to other things in the plan, including the proposed housing allocations.
Would you agree that that is a fundamental flaw in the process that we're moving along at the present time?
I wouldn't, no. I wouldn't hold up or delay an examination to reach interim conclusion in relation to the OAN. And there are, like I say, I need to examine the plan as a whole. That's the thing that I'm charged with doing. So that is what I'm doing. And as I say, if something as fundamental as the OAN or the housing requirement, if I agree, put it this way, if I agree with you, if in the event I were to agree with you, or others putting forward suggest that the OAN should be lower, as I say, that would have significant implications for the plan and the housing allocations proposed within it.
Well, the extent would be could be tremendous actually, because as if you look at the plan itself, there are 4340 houses already built or with permission, and that presumably has increased since the plan was before. But it could be that if the OAN went down to the levels of about 5,000, there would be absolutely no need to build on any more land whatever, let alone on the greenbelt.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, in the first instance, if I were to agree with you, I would ask the council. Well, the council would have before it a number of options, which I would set out. But how precisely how things would go forward from there, I couldn't say sitting here today. It depends on the exact circumstances and to be honest, precisely what conclusions I reach in relation to the OAN and the plan requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Ms Hamilton.
I've just had an email come through. Sorry, I didn't realise it. I don't do all this technology. I had an email. Just wanted to read this to you. Please, could you pass on my apologies that I won't be available for the Zoom meeting today. I am working. This is from Dr. Jenny Jones, and she just said the argument in regards to badgers and this site is very strong, and that's all she said at the end of the day. And she'd like all of the previous statements to be taken into accord. And I would just like to say that I think the Hairsborough case has very much light on sites like GA2 at the end of the day, and its exceptional circumstances. So, you know, even though it's a much bigger proportion, I think it really relates to a site like this in regards to its exceptional circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms Hamilton. Any final word from the council before before our discussion draws to an end? You're on mute.
No, thank you. We're all done, I think.
Okay, thank you. In which case then I'll draw a line under the discussion in relation to site GA2 and yeah, so next up we have site WY1, and I think that's probably a good point at which to take a break. So I make it 10:32. I'll adjourn the hearing then to resume at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Mr. Barkley, right.
Okay, can I just check, Mr. Franklin, that we are still live streaming? I believe we are.
Yes, we are still live.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, good. In which case it's now 11 o'clock, and so I resume the hearing. I'm turning then to site WY1. Mr. Logan, is Councillor Logan, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I have. I do wish to give my apologies for not really understanding the protocol and sequence of activities this morning. I clearly missed my opportunity to come in, and it was all over and done with before I realised what was happening. I just wanted to say that I would like you to ensure that our hearing statement that was originally submitted for the 24th of March is accepted, and the Community Council stands by that. I'm sorry to come in at the wrong point now.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So all of the statements, all of the representations that I've received, I will, you know, take all of those things into account in reaching my conclusion. So I can reassure you on that point, Councillor Logan.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll leave the meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Okay then, so site WY1, and that relates to the main modification put forward by the council, reference MM384. So in relation to this site then, issue 25.1A. So so the modification then, Mr. Smith, proposes, I think, to extend the site southwards a little onto land that in the original submission plan was proposed to be urban open land.
That's correct, yes.
So why, in your view, is it necessary for soundness to include it in the allocation?
The change is in response to material that was submitted in advance of the original hearing session on urban open land that you mentioned, ED50. That was additional landscape information put forward by the then promoter of the site, and which we agreed with, which identified there was a shallow landscape ridge basically on that site, and that was the better kind of interface between the allocation, or the end of the allocation, the start of the urban open land. And you'll probably recall, sir, there was an action that arose out of that session where you asked us to amend the policies map in that regard, and obviously sort of that was the position when we held the original session on WY1 in 2018. So from that point of view, nothing has changed since that point. It's moving the interface between those two designations, the allocation and the urban open land, to accord with the shallow ridge identified in the landscape evidence. And yeah, when you've been on site, or when you go on site, essentially it's the difference between drawing a line from the corner of the tennis courts at the southeast corner, or drawing it from the edge of the playing fields. And we say the latter is the most appropriate, that's the most effective boundary for the site. And then obviously to the north of that, the detailed criteria in relation to WY1 would apply, and to the south of that, the proposed policy in relation to urban open land would apply.
So in effect, if I've got these two things right, it was I'll start again. When the plan was submitted, it was in any event proposed to be removed from the green belt.
Correct, yeah.
And so it's a question then of where one draws the line.
Exactly, yes.
Where one draws the green belt boundary line. or is it not? Mr. Hornsby?
No, sir.
Yes.
As I understand it, the issue before you today is where you draw the line between the built development and urban open land. The entirety of the site was always proposed to be removed from the green belt, and that matter has been considered and discussed. So all we're talking about now is whether this additional area to be included in the allocation should be included in the allocation or be part of urban open land. It's the green belt issue has been discussed and is not before you today.
Yeah, okay. You are quite right. Sorry, did I interrupt you, Mr. Smith?
No, I was just going to make the point that Mr. Hornsby's just made to you that yes, the green belt boundary has always been drawn along the dual carriageway, which is the defensible boundary, and without revisiting the urban open land session, that was about, yes, we've drawn the most appropriate greenbelt boundary, but we don't necessarily want to build all over everything that's been released from the greenbelt. There's cases like this one where it's appropriate to have some restraint or to limit the amount of development that can take place within that redefined boundary.
And if I'm just done it correctly, this is one of those examples where the number of dwellings proposed hasn't altered, is that right?
That's correct.
Right, okay. Mr. Hawkins.
Good morning, Inspector. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak this morning. There's been a long history to this particular site, which you probably won't be aware of, but when it originally was proposed some 10 years ago, it was expected to be a site that would house 750 homes. That was then pared back to 350, which was then subsequently pared back to 300. As you are aware from our involvement in all of the EIP sessions, we are opposed to developments on Greenbelt inside the growth villages, and therefore this additional space would work towards our concerns in that respect. The ridge that Mr. Smith refers to was helpfully put there by the current landowner to sort of demarcate the position of contaminated land from what was also then considered to be agricultural land. So that's the reason for the ridge and its existence. I have comments to make about other points, Inspector, so I just really wanted to make those particular points. We believe that exceptional circumstances do not exist for this development or the allocation of Little Wymondley as a growth village. This extension extends the lack of soundness in an area with a significant benefit to the green belt, despite this site being helpfully considered by the NHDC of moderate importance. That's all I'd like to say on the first point, Inspector. Thank you.
Mr. Griffiths.
Good morning, sir. Yes, this morning I'm representing Wymondley Parish Council. And on that first point, I think we've now established that this particular sliver of land is not required for soundness. So that's all I want to say on the first point. Thank you.
Yeah, just on the soundness point, Mr. Smith, is that a question of if the policy's effectiveness?
Yes, obviously by bringing that additional land in, effectively the criteria of policy WY1 apply rather than the policies of CGB5, I think it is on urban open land. So yeah, it's the most effective criteria to apply to that strip of land. And as we say, given the evidence suggests that's sort of where the ridgeline is, and that should be the containing feature of any built development, then it seems most appropriate to draw the line there.
Sir, I was wondering if I might assist you a little with this.
Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. The actual history of this site is, yes, indeed, the council identified it for some 700 plus houses. That was a notional capacity based on the identification of sound, durable future green belt boundaries defined by the road network to the north, the west, and the south. We said that's an unrealistic capacity because there are constraints of high ground, 132 kV power lines and so forth. And we have been discussing where the boundary between urban open land not to be developed and the developable area should be. And the results of the main modification and the change to the proposals map is simply a factor of the work that has been done in detail, principally on a landscape assessment to identify where an appropriate boundary should be, there being no particularly appropriate boundary on the site. What that work has done in detail is identified a number of constraints within the site which affect capacity, particularly the desirability of retaining trees and hedgerows that exist, and also dealing with matters such as surface water, drainage and attenuation. Therefore, in order to be sound and to deliver the 300 dwellings, I should say, on the site, it is necessary that the boundary is moved from where it was shown in the original submission local plan to the line that is now shown as a result of the modification to the proposals map. So yes, it is necessary for soundness for that boundary to be moved. Thank you.
Put simply then, Mr. Osborne, in your view, because of the constraints, you simply wouldn't get that number of dwellings on the site if you didn't extend it slightly as currently proposed.
In a nutshell, yes, sir. You'll remember me saying when we met last time, some time ago in this examination, that we thought the capacity was perhaps rather more than 300 dwellings, and the policy expresses it with the word about. Now, having done that work in considerable detail as part of a pre-application to the council, we're satisfied that the capacity is 300 dwellings and not very many more, if at all, simply because we now have a better understanding of how the site works.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go on to B and the issue of deliverability. Then perhaps Mr. Osborne, first of all, I'll give Mr. Smith a slight rest. What do you say about deliverability, Mr. Osborne?
Thank you, sir. Yes, the site most certainly is deliverable. We've taken the opportunity of the hiatus in this examination, as I've mentioned, to carry out a considerable amount of work. You may be aware, sir, that pre-application is a route encouraged by North Hertfordshire Council. In Hertfordshire, it is also done separately with the lead local flood authority and with the highway authority. So we've conducted those pre-application discussions with those bodies as well, and also with the Education Authority. And you'll recall that the policy provides in effect an either or for the provision of an alternative replacement primary school. And the results of those discussions are, if I might quote, for example, from the Lead Local Flood Authority, who say, "We're supportive of the development as it should provide betterment from the flood risk perspective to the village, as surface water will be managed and conveyed to the west downstream of the areas known to experience flooding. But recognising that flooding has been an issue in the village, they've actually requested," and I quote again, "the off-site greenfield discharge to be lower from the standard Q-bar rate to the 1:1. Now, I'm not a flood risk engineer, so I can't exactly explain what that means, but we accept that the capacity for surface water storage on the site should be greater than it would normally be in order to make sure that there is absolutely no risk of exaggerating the present flood risk conditions in the village itself." Similarly, with the Highway Authority, they, in a nutshell, give it a clean bill of health subject to the details of the transport assessment, which has been scoped with them. And the Education Authority have helpfully, with North Hertfordshire District Council, given us effectively a housing mix, which means that the solution for education in the village will be to expand the existing primary school within its confines, and it is limited in its overall capacity, rather than developing a new primary school within the site itself, again, which helps our ability to achieve the 300 dwellings described in the policy. So those elements of work have now been done. The site has been screened for environmental impact assessment under the current regulations, and no significant impacts have been identified as a result of that process. So here we are downwind of a pre-application with North Hertfordshire. There are, I will happily admit, a number of amendments we can make as a result of that process. One would not expect any proposal to have a clean bill of health and hit the nail on the head absolutely first time. But we would be in a position to make a planning application as soon as the local plan is in a position to endorse us doing so. Therefore, the site, we feel, is without question deliverable.
Including in terms of land ownership and landowners being willing, etc.
Absolutely, the site is in a single land ownership option to my client's Welbeck strategic land. Welbeck are in a position as development promoters. It will be in their interest to bring the site to market immediately on the grant of planning consent. And I know from experience that this site is actually quite well known amongst the principal developers in the area who are champing at the bit, shall I say. It will be not a site unlikely to be developed.
Mr. Hawkins.
Inspector, this site was brought to North Hertfordshire District Council by an organisation called New Road Development on the basis that there was a promise that he would, with the money made from the site, be able to deliver a road that bypassed Hitchin. That system, that idea, that concept is now entirely defunct. We are sitting here at this point in time in Little Wymondley, and we believe that in relation to the plan as it's currently laid out, that there is insufficient access to the site overall, and that for a development of this size, one road in and out, starting and terminating in a flood zone, does not provide suitable access to this site.
Okay, I just need to remind everyone that I'm not talking about the whole site, apart from where that is absolutely unavoidable, as it was in some of our discussions in relation to GA2 this morning. So the focus for discussion today is the additional land proposed, and that's something that I have highlighted in my matters and issues paper as well. So if I can ask that people focus on the new land that's proposed through the main modification.
Yes, Inspector, that is indeed what I'm trying to do, and obviously schools and other things also don't have a relationship to the strip of land that we're talking about, but I noticed that you allowed Mr. Osborne to put his piece. So I may continue. Picking up on the environmental issues that you refer to in your matters. The Wymondley Parish Council, working with their Neighbourhood Plan Committee, paid for extensive research into the issues around air quality in and around the village of Little Wymondley, and over a period of 13 months working alongside Friends of the Earth and utilising the controls set by DEFRA, we established that at certain points along the A602, the air quality levels exceeded the maximum levels allowable by the European Union, taken as an average over this particular period. The villages of Wymondley have no local provision stores, and when you consider that the shopping centres of both Stevenage and Hitchin are close on 5 miles away from the village of Little Wymondley, and the bus service is sporadic, I would suggest that this proposed development in its currently proposed and expanded form would create issues with sustainability and extend the level of poor air pollution levels even further. And I believe they relate to the environmental impact of extending this particular site.
Thank you. Mr. Griffiths.
Thank you, sir. I'll try to focus on the issues. You have our response from the Parish Council on question B, and the issues that Mr. Osborne outlined are there. Things have moved on, as he said, but I would draw your attention to these issues about transport, for example, and particularly the issues around flooding, which are been highlighted in the neighbourhood plan. But I think in terms of the actual sliver of land that we're discussing here, I'm wondering whether this sliver of land has been included in the development area in order to increase the number of dwellings on the site beyond 300. And I'm a little bit suspicious of that, but however, I don't think there's anything more I want to say on that. I'll try to focus on the issue.
Okay, thank you. In terms of question B, Mr. Smith, the question of deliverability. Is there anything that the council wanted to add?
You've got in our statement, other just to reiterate what's already been said, that although the area of land's being added, there's no increase in the number of homes proposed. So in that sense, traffic impacts and so on and so forth aren't affected by the additional land. You're still looking at the same quantum of homes.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to C. I know we've already touched on this anyway, but this is the question of whether it's whether the inclusion of the new land is justified and appropriate in terms of likely impacts of the development upon it. You've probably just given me what you would say in response to that in any event, haven't you, Mr. Smith?
Yes. As you say, we've talked about the ridge line, and given it's a sort of 50-metre strip across the field, there's no new impacts that arise, or no new constraints that arise in terms of including that versus not including it.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Inspector. In relation to 25.1 item C, in 2004, the County Council commissioned a landscape report with the Babtai Group for all the villages in Hertfordshire.
My apologies. The County Council commissioned a report. A what?
A landscape report with the Babtai Group. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, yeah. Oh, it's right, okay, yeah. Is that the same as, is that the name of the company? It's Babtai, yeah.
Babtai Group is the name of the company that actually produced the report on behalf of the County Council.
Okay, thank you.
And this report was conducted and delivered on behalf of the County Council for all the villages in Hertfordshire. Helpfully, we, and I refer to we being the group that was formed to create the neighbourhood plan in Wymondley, we refer to this document in the creation of our neighbourhood plan for the parish of Wymondley, and the details therein were imported to our data storage system, saving as we did the original document that refers to Area 215, Wymondley and Titmore Green. I say helpfully because since its original issue in 2004 and our use of the same document in 2014 to form our neighbourhood plan, it appears to have been heavily doctored with 4 vital pages removed on versions that now appear on the North Herts and County Council's websites. And I believe I have shared this report with you in the past, Inspector. Clearly, the removal of the 4 pages are helpful to the NHDC local plan, yet this is relevant to our discussion today. This report makes some very clear statements about the area of Little Wymondley that has some pertinence to what we're discussing, and which we relied upon in drawing up the now ratified neighbourhood plan, the first neighbourhood plan in North Herts to achieve that status. Page 5 of the report refers to the village of Little Wymondley, which lies to the north of the area, would be vulnerable to inappropriate or unsympathetic development and any proposals which are not in scale with the existing development. Page 6 refers to, under the heading large urban extensions, this type of development would not be appropriate in this character area. Page 8 refers to avoid location of new development in visual intrusive locations such as on upper ground or where they would be visible on the skyline. As I've explained, Inspector, we relied upon that report in the forming of our neighbourhood plan based on the fact that it was an independent report that was drawn up by a reputable local authority. The proposed development contravenes all of the above proposals. Inspector, the extension of this site continues to exacerbate this situation, and the site was previously reduced because of its intrusion to the line of sight from grade 1 and 2 listed houses. The area of WY1 is owned by a family that have lived locally since the early 1900s and have transacted the removal of gravel in the 1940s and 1950s. The resulting pits have been used to provide refuse removal services to uncontrolled landfill, both in the field area at the bottom and to the left of Blakemore End Road, where flooding now occurs, and the fields at the rear of Bungalow Farm towards the A602. Both these sites are known to contain contaminated land. At the building of the A602, the contaminated land was removed to the fields of the site of WY1. And the ridge mentioned marks the point that where this contamination starts without taking any concern for hazards leaching from this site. That's all I have to say at this point in time, Inspector.
Thank you for that. Mr. Griffiths.
Thank you. So I'd just like to endorse the points that Mr. Hawkins has just made. And obviously we've seen the detailed landscape assessment in Appendix 4 of ED 50. I think we've made previous representations on this issue at hearing sessions, but I think I'd like to endorse what Mr. Hawkins has said. Just to add also, perhaps by the modification to think about the impact perhaps on the playing fields, which are to the southeast of the site extension. I'd like to mention that as well, but certainly that shallow ridge line is an artificial one. I went out in the pouring rain again last Thursday to have a good look around the site. It's certainly open, and even in the pouring rain, it's a very, very open site as a whole. And I don't think that this artificial ridge line is going to make much difference to that fact. Thank you, sir.
So is there then an issue of contaminated land in the area that the site's proposed to be extended into?
The short answer, if I may, sir, is no, there isn't. Again, we've done that work through WSP engineering consultants who've identified that there are issues, as there are in almost every development site, but there is nothing exceptional here. If there is an artificial ridge line that's been created, it's actually with spoil that came out of the cutting of the bypass. But our investigations have not demonstrated that there is anything which is a constraint on development. If I might, whilst I've got the floor, sir, just touch on the landscape. And in that respect, I entirely agree with Mr. Hawkins. Development shouldn't break the ridge line and shouldn't be visible in higher parts of the site. Again, we've done complete summer and winter landscape assessment, and I sit here at my desk looking at the wireframe that have been done from 3 or 4 different aspects by EDP, a reputable landscape consultancy, which again justify the line that divides the urban open land from the developable area of the site, with a simple purpose of ensuring that development doesn't break that ridge line.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Sorry, Inspector, if I can just come back on one of the comments made by Mr. Osborne. The actual spoil was taken from the bypass, but that land was contaminated and therefore was piled up on the land that we're now talking about in relation to WY1. And that is information that is drawn from local knowledge. As you probably would appreciate, sir, that there was a lack of licensing of landfill for a long period of time in the last century. And what we're now seeing is potentially investigations that might be made on what's there in certain spots along the way. It still doesn't resolve the issue of leaching. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, on these points, what does the council say?
I think we're lapsing a little into perhaps detailed development management matters, but from the plan making point of view, if you look at the criteria for WY1 as proposed to be amended, that requires that firstly proposals are informed by a site-specific landscape assessment, and secondly that any development undertakes a contaminated land preliminary risk assessment, particularly in relation to historic landfill. So those items are covered off, and as Mr. Osborne has said, to be honest, it sounds like some of those boxes have effectively already been ticked, but from the plan making point of view, you can be satisfied there are proportionate and necessary criteria in the plan itself that would address those issues. And again, that goes to the overall point of effectiveness, that obviously those criteria apply to the extent of land that is identified on the policies map. So clearly we want that in the right place so we can apply those criteria to that land.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Inspector. Yes, I think if you note some of the plan criteria that has been stated by the NHTC, you will see there are a considerable number of criteria that needs to be overcome before a development can be started in WY1, which in some respects sort of suggests that it's not the best place to go building some homes. And if you compare the criteria numbers for that site versus other sites across North Hertfordshire, it's almost twice as many criteria that have to be met before a suitable site of this type could be allocated for building. So again, one of the reasons why we support the removal of growth villages from the plan. So you've heard matters on that earlier. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on issue 25.1c? Okay, then I'll go to 25.2. Mr. Smith.
Yes, similar to our discussion on GA2 this morning, in terms of green belts, obviously our assessment of harm effectively looks at that site as a whole, so you can't really look at this strip in isolation. So as Mr. Hawkins identified, we've identified this site makes a moderate contribution to greenbelt purposes and would therefore result in moderate harm, mainly all the same exceptional circumstances that we've previously outlined to you in relation to WY1 at the Matter 11 hearing sessions apply equally to this land. And just to reiterate the point that the proposed greenbelt boundary hasn't changed as a result of this main modification. It's always been proposed in the submitted plan that the greenbelt boundary runs along the dual carriageway bypass, because that is the permanent defensible boundary.
So that, as I think I said earlier, there's no new greenbelt issue to discuss here, as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I wondered, Ms. Osby, if that was strictly true, because it is currently greenbelt.
It is, yes.
And so, aside from anything else, the exceptional circumstances position is probably different now to what it was when the plan was originally submitted, including it as urban open land. The exceptional circumstances point is now about housing rather than something else.
Yeah, I think it was always proposed that there would be urban open land in that part of the site. It's simply just a question of where you draw the allocation line. But you know,
yeah,
we are where we are.
Okay. I think what I can quite readily do is take all of the questions under 25.2 together. Yeah. Is anyone? Is that something that you wanted to pick up on, Mr. Hawkins or Mr. Griffiths?
I think so. We've discussed greenbelt allocations at length in the EIPs, and we've also mentioned to you our concerns about the growth villages in particular. And I'm sure that you have taken those points on board, sir. So I really, as you quite rightly say, cannot see any difference between the bit of land today and the bit of land yesterday. It's all part of the same site. It's all still in greenbelt. And we would obviously like it to remain so. So thank you, sir.
Mr. Griffiths?
Just to come forward on that point as well. I think we've looked at the Greenbelt issues. You will obviously have seen ED 161A and B, and certainly the what puzzles me is why we have here the categorization of this land as making a moderate contribution to the Greenbelt, when overall the gap between Stevenage and Hitchin is classified as significant, and that I just can't get my head around that. But certainly that's a point we've made in the Parish Council statement, and I think certainly that's something we would reinforce. A bit the piece about the growth villages, I want to return to that tomorrow, if I may. And exceptional circumstances, I think I don't want to return to that. You'll be pleased to hear you've heard the exchange. I heard the exchange you had with Mr. Norgan early this morning. So I think I'll let that rest there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else from anyone else in relation to this site? Okay, very good. Yep, I don't have anything additional to ask, which, yeah, feels slightly uncomfortable taking a lunch break so early in the day, and so highly irregular a situation that is. Is there anything else that we need to pick up on we could usefully use the time for before the lunch break? I have to say I can't think of anything. Miss Hornsby shaking her head. No. Okay, very good. In which case I'll take the lunch break now. Unfortunately, we can't start our afternoon session until 2 o'clock. So there we are. I make it then 11 for. Oh, can I just check, Mr. Franklin? Do we need to leave this meeting? I think we probably do, don't we?
That's my understanding, because we've got new people joining this afternoon, and they've got a different invitation. So I think we do have to check out and check back in again on a different invitation.
Yes, I can confirm that.
Thank you, Louise.
Check out, and there's a new invitation for the session this afternoon.
Smashing, yeah, I thought so, but having got it wrong so many times before, I thought I'd better just double check this time. Okay, then I make it then 11:42. I'll adjourn the hearing to resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.